Welcome back to the Speakeasy podcast. It's just me today. I want to do more solo episodes this year. That is one of my intentions, which is kind of what we're going to talk about today. To the point that I actually built them into the calendar. I may not know what I'm going to talk about, but I know I'm going to get on here and yap. The Ending Well series was really well received. I loved doing it. 2 episodes a week was a lot, but I loved making that content. I loved breaking things down with you guys in that like longer form way. I'm definitely feeling a draw towards long form content just as my seasons change. And so I'm excited to do this with you guys this year. And I also am going to have Jeremy on the podcast more often, like more than once a year, maybe twice. We're keep the bar low. This episode is about setting intentions. What are we supposed to do with January, right? I think that's how a lot of people feel, is like, everybody's telling me I'm supposed to start something new, but I maybe don't really feel like I'm supposed to revamp or rebrand my life in the dead of winter. And it's like different camps have been formed. And so we're going to talk through all of that. I am doing this episode halfway through the month on purpose, though. You have plenty of time to do all of this. Winter does not end until mid-March. I think March 20th is the first day of spring. And that's just the official solstice. Winter, it's such a variable, right? Yours may last into May. There are places that get snow in May, but I do think we are biologically drawn to those solstice dates and have inclinations of things we want to do, start, stop, etc. And so I didn't want to put this out the first week of January when people are still recovering from the holidays and trying to get back into some normalcy. We're about 2 weeks, maybe 1 week into some more normal rhythms. And now is actually the time that I think a lot of us have some amount of clarity or ability to think through some of these things. Our brains are coming back online. And so, like I said, I think there are 2 camps when it comes to January, the new year, the beginning of the year. There's this isn't the real new year, and there's full send, everything starts fresh the first of the year. And I have lived in both camps, actually, in my 37 years. I spent a lot of years really embracing the first of the year, setting real goals and going, shooting for the stars day one. And then I also, for years, really rejected the idea of January 1st, and that, I was very like, this isn't the biological new year. This was set by Rome. I don't want anything to do with it. And I have come to a place where I feel like I've built a camp in the middle of those 2 camps. And this is basically my invitation for you to join me in my camp if you want to. So for most of human history, like, there's one thing we have to get really clear. New Year has been tied to nature, not a date. Okay, so it usually aligned with spring. That's when we're planting things. That's when people are coming out of their houses. That's when we're starting like breeding. Like, you have to backtrack this, right? You have to go to like our more agrarian ancestors. And we're going to talk about our ancestors and how we used to live, because one thing that my therapist told me really early when we started, and I may have mentioned this before, is like, we still have the same nervous systems as our ancestors. We still have the same basic biology as our ancestors, and that for most of human history, things very much did not look the way that they look today, and that is probably part of why so many of us struggle to get on board with what's expected of us and how things work now, and so I am in full agreement that it makes no sense to start a whole new thing, a whole new life, when it's pretty much dark outside all the time. Like, look at this through that lens. Farmers are not farming. They're not driving cattle. They're not planting new things. People are inside. So it makes no sense. 46 BC, Julius Caesar reforms the Roman calendar and establishes January 1st as the start of the civil years. We're going to do a quick history recap so you can understand where we're coming from. So this was because the Roman officials began their administrative year on January 1st. So this was literally just the government completely jacking up everything for their own convenience. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Kind of like daylight savings which I guess was kind of also to help people, but so many things, right? So now the new year is political, not agricultural, not biological. Rome falls. For over 1,000 years, there just is no official new year, which I think is so fascinating. Everybody's kind of starting at their own times. It's, like pick your own adventure. And then the Pope introduces the Gregorian calendar in 1582, which is to correct time drift. Obviously, the Catholics they're like all in on it from the jump. It takes everybody else a good while to get on board, but by 1752, England and its colonies adopt it, and in the next couple of hundred of years, it's the global default, except for places like Ethiopia. They're still in 2018, I think, or maybe 2019, which I'm like really there? Or no, I'm just kidding. It's like just their year. Like I could back it up a little bit. So if you imagined human history like a 24-hour day, January 1st being the beginning of the year shows up at 11:56. It is so new. We have always marked it by the spring. That's why it feels so wrong and foreign and abnormal for so many people. That there is no light, there is no life. Everything, regardless of where you live, is like a little bit dead, at least. There's nothing inspiring in nature for us to pull from. And so we are trying to respond to a rhythm that we're completely out of sync with. And so I think that's why so many people really struggle with the January urgency. And so as a result, people have completely rejected January in its entirety. I almost kind of think it's, as with everything, anything can swing too far. And so I think it's understandably swung into January means nothing. It's just like another month. We don't need to do anything. We don't need to worry about anything. And if we're looking at this through like a semi-historical lens, I can't really agree with that either, because think about it. Christmas has been celebrated, the feasts of Christmas have been celebrated where they are for hundreds of years. And so we have been feasting, celebrating 12th night, Epiphany, and then around now, and this is just an educated guess, but I would think people's intentions, maybe not actions so much, but their intentions would be turning towards the year that's ahead of them and spring, which is now 2-ish months away. People would start doing their necessary maintenance, repair, making new tools, planning out plots, gardens, breeding, right? Because again, we're agrarian naturally. People worked the lands with their hands until, again, just recently. It's a very new development in terms of the entirety of human history. And so this is what, like, their biology, our biology lends us towards preparation this time of year. So I am spastic. I just hit my mic. I am 100% on board with not revamping your life. I don't think you should revamp your life, period. We're going to get into that a little bit. I am all for not trying to start new things this time of year. But I also don't think we need to swing into not doing anything this time of year, because I think this is biologically, historically, and just naturally the best time of year to set yourself up to have a really great year. So I think I am here to make the case that January matters, and it matters a lot. And I can understand why people are so burnt out on New Year's resolutions that they've completely thrown the baby out with the bathwater and want to go against it entirely. I don't think this is a time to be visibly productive, but it's a hinge month. I think January, February are hinge months that can really inform the way our year goes. And as I've kind of built this new middle ground camp in the last couple of years, where like I'm not rejecting one thing, I'm not fully embracing another, it's worked really well for me to take this time to do things like maintenance and repair and taking stock and setting intention and making some plans so that when that natural spring of inspiration starts to bubble, you're ready to go with it. So, if that sounds good to you, if you're like, okay, I do feel a pull to, like, I think we all feel more introspective and like we could ask some questions and set some intentions. And maybe if you've been really hard in the New Year's resolution paint, you don't know how to do that. I'm here to help. I have ideas. This is actually one of my favorite times of the year because, like I said, I think it sets the stage. So, what can we learn and apply from our agrarian ancestors, the way that they would have done January and February? And I think it's really cool. As I was researching this and kind of just looking into the history of what this time of year looked like for the people that came before us, I saw this really natural bridge between what they were doing, working the land with their hands, and what we're doing today and how there's crossover. So the first one is taking stock. Christmas is over, people have feasted for days, they're not harvesting. So now it's time to take a look at what we've got, right? And we're counting grain, vegetables, meats, figuring out how long supplies are going to last, how many seeds do we need, that kind of stuff. And one thing that I loved about this when I was looking at it was that men and women, everybody did this. Men and women both did this. They just did it in different ways, right? The women would be in charge of how much do we have canned? How much do we have for grains for me to make bread? Men are outside counting sheep or, tools or supplies. Maybe they were in charge of the meat, whatever. I think it's so important. One of the biggest things I've learned in the last couple of years is how different men and women are, that the purpose that God has for us are very similar, but we do them in such wildly different ways. And so I love doing this stuff with Jeremy. It's my favorite. I mean, he's my best friend and I love talking through this stuff with him. But I think because we've talked through this stuff together for so long at this point, it's our intentions and our years kind of align and work together without being duplicates of each other. Our intentions for this year are so different, but they're aligned, but they work together. One kind of protects and the other kind of supports the other. And I saw that really reflected in historically how people used this time of year. So this is an invitation, do this together. If that feels to you, that may be an even better reason to do it. You don't have to spend hours doing this, but carve out 30 minutes and sit down together and talk about how you want the year to look. And then when you're on the same page, do it with your kids too. We've gotten so that we sit down and have a little family powwow on New Year's Day in between our cabbage and black-eyed peas, just to kind of, how are you feeling? What do you know, we don't make our kids do anything crazy, but I think it starts with you, but you can pull your people into this and then experience a lot more alignment, honestly. So, getting back to taking stock, taking inventory shaped how they moved forward, and it would be the first thing that they would do. So, I don't know about you, but I don't take stock. In the past, have not taken stock of my life very often, and I don't know a lot of people that do that as regular practice because it can be wildly uncomfortable. This is not as easy as counting beans. Okay? This requires some time and some quiet and asking yourself some hard questions and making the space. And you can go ahead and buckle up because that's going to be the drum I'm going to beat probably the whole year is making space and creating margin. We are all busy. We all have a lot on our plates, obviously from varying levels and spectrums. But I refuse to believe that, or let me rephrase that. If you can't build 30 minutes of margin into your day to sit and be quiet, we've got a whole different problem on our hands. Do it in the car and carpool. Just don't scroll your phone. I think you'd be shocked by the margin you have when you intentionally start to look for it. You know what I mean? And I say that because I love you. And I say that if you didn't listen to the Ending Well series, I had to totally tell on myself, and I hated it. There was so much of the Ending Well series that I was like, oh, this is so revealing and embarrassing. But I had to talk about that when I stopped doom scrolling so much, I was so convicted and embarrassed by the amount of time I had. And I was the person constantly walking around like, I have no margin. There's no time I can't even go to the grocery. No, babe, you just need to put your phone down. Just telling on myself. And, it was really easy to make the excuse that it was for my work, which it was, but I was still doom scrolling. Anyway, I'm not going to just tell you, okay, you need to take stock and then be like, figure it out. So there is an accompanying, I should have said this at the top, but there's an accompanying PDF that goes with this episode that is all the questions I'm about to rattle through. So I don't want you to feel like you need to pull out your pen and notebook and jot them all down. You can go to the show notes of this episode, click a link, you have to put your email in. I will send you the PDF. It's nothing, like it's not this big intention setting ebook, but it is, as I was building this episode out, I was like, I would want to be able to look at this. And I have this in bits and pieces in my notes app. So it was good for me to kind of have it all in one cohesive place for myself as well. But you will need to carve some time out for this. You will need to be able to slow down and be quiet enough. You don't have to do it all in one fell swoop. It doesn't have to be, a whole day of journaling. I think sometimes it's wise to break it up. Ask God for guidance. Pray before you do it. Try to get into your body a little bit, touch what's around you, slow down enough, and then just ask yourself some of these questions. And I'm just going to go through some of the areas of life and some of the questions, but there's more in the PDF. I think the first thing we have to look at is our time. I know I just kind of harped on it a little bit, but what is consistently draining your time? What reliably gives it back? You want there to be an ebb and flow to this of positive and negative. I would hate for you to take stock of your life and walk away going, that was all terrible. If you have to search and hunt for the positive in some of these areas, then do it. Lean into that. But I want you to be able to write okay, what is draining my time? What is making it so that I feel like I'm running around ragged, but then also what's filling my time that I love? What feels like a good use of my time? Another one is your energy. Kind of same question. What leaves you tired? And then also what leaves you tired but also satisfied? What leaves you tired and resentful? Because if you're in an even remotely similar season of life to me, the reality is you're probably a little tired. Is it the good kind? Because there are days that I get to the end of with the girls, with homeschooling and everything, and I'm exhausted, but in the best way, in that been in the sun all day kind of way. And then there are days that I get to the end of the day and I'm like, what was that? Have you seen, there's the reels that have gone around touching grass after living the day that I prayed for because what was that? Sometimes it'd be like that. You know what I mean? And so just get honest about what your time looks like, what's a drain on it, what's a fill. You can also look at your finances lightly. We're doing an overview. It is so easy to get obsessive in that area, and I love a good budget deep dive, and we do that. We usually more do it around tax season because why not? Why not just pile on all the awful things at one time? Every April, I'm like, why am I in such a bad mood? It's because I'm about to give the government all my money for no reason. Anyway, don't get obsessive here, but what feels stable, what feels tight, what can be cut, it's great to go through, and there's nothing worse than finding out how much you're paying in subscriptions that you don't use. Doing an overview, getting on the same page so that you can maybe do a deeper dive in a minute, I think is always a good thing. And that's just let's be real, it's a big area of our lives. I know it's not exactly the most fun thing to talk about, but your finances impact how you feel about your life really significantly. Another area I like to evaluate is margin. Where is there breathing room? Where am I suffocating? And is there any way I can make changes to that? And something else I meant to say before when we started talking about this, I'm really mostly just asking you to look at these things. We're setting the table. We're not eating yet. We're not trying to dive in. So I know for like the go-getters and high achievers, even just as I'm listing this off, you're like, yeah, all this is going to do is create a huge to-do list. Well, this is great practice in restraint and self-control because all we're doing is evaluating right now. That's the first step. Consumption is another big one. What are you taking in? And is it beneficial? We're going to get into that a little bit more in a minute, but relationships is a huge area to take stock in and evaluate. And this is actually the first area that I started doing this in years ago, probably back pre 2020. I started doing basically a friendship inventory at the end of the year. And this is not reinventing the MySpace top 8. Okay? This is not putting your friends in some kind of numerical order. It is what relationships feel really mutual right now, which ones feel one-sided on someone else's part, one-sided on my part, what relationships feel nourishing, natural, draining, where do I feel safe being honest, where do I feel like I'm performing? And again, we're not making any cuts here. We're not cutting the roster. We're just being smart and looking at who the players are and what are their strengths. Now, I'm just going to be for real with you. At this point, if you're doing this evaluation and something becomes really clear, and I'm saying this because I've had this experience a couple of times where when I was doing inventory, I realized how I really felt about something. I have a couple of times made the decision, I'm going to go ahead and let myself off the hook with this one for a minute. They're not dead to me. I'm not mad at them in any way, but I'm just seeing this through maybe a more clear lens right now, and this is feeling a little lopsided, and so I'm going to give them the opportunity to come to me. Because again, I'm going to reference the Ending Well series a ton, I'm sure. But one of the things I talked about was having to just kind of give people space. I think I was specifically talking about Jeremy, but giving him the space to show up. If you're always like taking up all the space, if you're always doing everything, then you don't even let other people show up. And so you may be surprised. You may take a step back and that other person takes a step towards you. And then now things don't feel so one-sided. Unfortunately, another option is you take that step back and then you never speak to them again. You have to be aware that that's a possibility and okay with that before you take the step back. But that is one area that I have just, once you see the inventory, you kind of have to take a step, And then another area I would absolutely evaluate is your relationship with God. Where do you feel close to God right now? Or how are you hearing him? Another Ending Well episode. I'm so sorry I hear myself and it's so redundant, but the first episode that I did of the whole series was about hearing from God. And so are you clear on how you hear from God? Maybe like a handful of ways. Is he speaking to you most clearly through one of those channels? Where do you feel distant or kind of confused or dry? One thing that I ask myself that's hard to ask yourself is, what prayers have I stopped praying? Popping in real quick to remind you about Crowd Health. I had the CEO of Crowd Health on the show last week. So if you want a full deep dive on insurance alternative, that's a great option. But this is a conversation that so many of us are having as adults. Like, why am I paying for insurance, but I feel like I don't have insurance? Or when I need it, I can't get approval or it's nowhere to be found. Why can't I use it on things that will actually make me better? Why can I only use it on these approved things? And that's why so many people are opting out of traditional, Obamacare, if we're honest, predatory and oppressive health insurance and moving into alternatives like Crowd Health. With Crowd Health, you pay a monthly fee. This gives you access to a team of bill negotiators, lower cost prescriptions and testing, vetted doctor lists. And if something big happens, you pay the first $500 and then the rest of the crowd steps in and helps you. And this is how something like this is meant to work. We want our money going showing to people that we know it's actually helping and not lining the pockets of the people that created the system in the first place. So this open enrollment, you can take your power back, join Crowd Health to get started for $99 for your first 3 months by using the code SPEAKEASY when you go to joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code SPEAKEASY. Also, Crowd Health is not insurance. This is how you can opt out of insurance and take your power back. You can do that at joincrowdhealth.com. I think about the Proverbs 13:12, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. I think sometimes we've been hoping for something for so long, we just stop asking about it. And maybe God wants you to start talking to him about that thing again. I don't know. It's just a thought. So that's the first, that's kind of the beginning. You don't have to do anything with this yet. Just sit with it. Let the awareness kind of be enough. This is a really great intentional starting place. I think it's the first thing that you should do when you are leaning into embracing the winter months and how it can set the stage. And then let's move into repair and preparation. Okay. So we can't be out working. We're fixing what's broken or could be better so that when we're ready to start, it's all ready, right? So we're sharpening, patching, mending. Everybody's doing this. Again, like I said, men and women are doing this in their own rights, tools and, shirts. Like everybody's doing something different. Maybe this is the area that this can feel overwhelming. And so we're going to tone this down. I don't want you to try to revamp your life. But with what we just went through, with taking stock and evaluating, and maybe it's been a really hard year. Maybe you've just survived the holidays and the idea of starting something new makes you want to just curl up in a ball. That's okay. Maybe what you need is repair before you can run a new race. So how do we step into that? My most basic advice is prioritize the things that seem too simple to be important because they are most likely the most vital. I'm about to sound like your mom, but are you getting enough sleep? Obviously, there are, caveats for having young kids, and I understand that. I lived it. But outside of those years, are you getting enough sleep? Are you prioritizing that? Or are you staying up super late to read or watch or whatever, and then you can't figure out why you feel so drained? Move your body. I know it's winter. Put a workout on YouTube. There are body weight exercises on YouTube or walking exercises on YouTube. Move your body. That is why we feel so detached from our bodies and our reality, is because we don't move them, and we were meant to move every single day. We are so divorced from our bodies. I cannot emphasize that enough. And I'm learning how to come back into my body and feel very passionate about that right now. And so starting with a few things like sleep, sunlight, movement. When's the last time you went outside and touched grass and put your face in the sun? And I understand, again, there are states that don't have, the sun isn't shining. I understand, and that really sucks, and I hate that for you, and seasonal depression is so real. I do think a lot of these things can help with those things. My love and appreciation for living in Louisiana has grown exponentially as I've become an adult, because, yeah, it's 30 degrees, but the sun is out, and I can go for a walk. You know what I mean? I saw a meme the other day that was like, if you don't go outside and touch grass at least once a day, you are taking part in an experiment that used to only be reserved for prisoners. Ooh, right? Another thing is reduce stimulation as much as possible. Stop scrolling on your phone while you eat. I started, who is it? Dr. Chris Lee on Instagram, I think. He started doing what he called no stim lunches. And I picked that up a couple of months ago. It is so helpful. Now, look, my kids are around, and that's stimulation. But the TV going, my kids talking to me making lunch, and trying to check in with my phone, no, awful. I can feel the stimulation in my body just talking about it. Turn off the background noise and try to have more quiet and rest without earning it. That is repairing. That is so healing and repairing to your nervous system. Just that one small thing. And another step, I feel like I'm willing to give us baby steps, right? You don't have to jump in, but here's some little things to do if you want to, would be to repair your inputs. So that was something that we took stock of before. And it's similar to what I was just talking about with reducing stimulation, but you took stock of what you're consuming. Are there things that became glaringly obvious that you should probably go ahead and cut? For example, oh gosh, I think it was August? No, because it was after Charlie Kirk died. So maybe end of September, beginning of October, I felt like I needed to get off of X, which I loved X. X and Pinterest were probably my most used social media apps, to be honest. They're not the ones that I'm established on. Maybe that's why I like them or liked them. And so I decided, I kind of heard from God and was like, I should probably get off of X. This is not adding anything of benefit. Like nothing of benefit, nothing of good to my life. It had kind of become, I don't know what it looks like now, but it had kind of become a little bit of a cesspool. And I tried to get off naturally, just, take the app, but then I found myself logging in on my desktop. So I literally took my laptop to Jeremy and said, I need you to change my X password because I have no self-control. And that was 3 months ago. I no longer miss it at all. I don't know if I could get back on it now. And I wasn't excited to cut that out when I did, but now I'm so thankful I was obedient to that tug. And so if there are things that are tugging, listen to them. I think that is so repairing and so preparing. And it may just be for a season. It may not be forever. I may get back on X one day. I'm open to that. But in this season where I needed less noise, that was the easiest thing to go. I also never really check Facebook. So right now my social media looks like Instagram and Pinterest. I also don't have TikTok. Pick your poisons and pick the things that are poisoning you the least. And I would even pile on top of that and say, whatever you decide to cut, add something that's filling. So I cut X and started reading poetry. I know. Who is she? She reads poetry. I barely recognize her. But I have fallen in love with Mary Oliver as a poet over the year. And I would mostly just read her stuff kind of scrolling on Pinterest, which is where I discovered her. And then I just a couple of weeks ago, or probably like a month ago, realized this would probably be even better to read like a hard copy, like an actual physical poem. And so I got rid of X and I bought some poetry books. But that, whatever your thing is, fill it with something good. So then another thing that our ancestors would do this time of year, so they're preparing, repairing, taking stock. This was also when a lot of learning and educating took place because the elders were home. They're sitting around the fire. They're not outside working. And they had slower paces and less daylight, which equaled more stories and more instructing. I also think it's so vital. This one's especially for the homeschool moms. And for me, I'm kind of preaching to you to preach to myself. So much educating for so much of history was oral storytelling and the passing down of fables and family stories and history and the Bible. And that's not to knock further education, because clearly I'm educating my children beyond storytelling. But I'm only, 2 years into this whole homeschooling thing, but I have really learned the power of story. And also, side note, this is just one of my personal soapboxes, audiobooks. I will fist fight somebody that says audiobooks don't count. Your ancestors did not pass down stories for years and years and years for us to act like audiobooks don't count. That's literally how people read and told stories for all of human history. Audiobooks count. I don't know why I felt the need to include that soapbox, but I know, so their paces maybe stayed slow a little bit longer than ours does. I know that our pace picks up a lot more quickly, but we just evaluated, is there margin that you can fight for that will allow you to continue to grow in wisdom and continue to extend that wisdom to the people around you? And so some good questions that I like to ask myself, this is kind of evaluating, but also allows you to move forward, is a big one for me is, what did I learn last year that hasn't fully integrated into how I move and act now? It's a really interesting thing to sit with because I don't know about you, but 2025 was packed jam freaking full of lessons. Drinking out of a fire hydrant of lessons. And a lot of years look like that, some more so than others or more easily than others. But I've been sitting with lately, okay, let's look at what I learned last year. Is it evident in my life? Because a lesson truly learned, there should be fruit of it. It should change something in the way that you interact with the world. So, like, what needs space to settle? What do I need to meditate on so that it can kind of come to life a little bit more? This isn't honestly so much about new information. It would be about making sense of what's already been lived so that you can carry it into the next season. So that all of these things that you learned in the last year don't stay in the last year. How do they integrate into your life? And another big one is leaning into letting learning be relational rather than a self improvement project. Who do I learn best with? Where do I feel safe asking questions that some people might think are dumb? Who do I want to learn alongside, not necessarily from, but with? So, one of my best friends, Amy, is one of the biggest learners I've ever known. I love learning alongside her. I love that she'll be learning something and I'll be learning something, and then we'll eventually talk about it and we'll both kind of do the, you too. I love learning with my kids. That is one of the greatest joys of homeschooling is rediscovering and relearning things with them. And I know that the homeschool critics take that and go, oh, how are you educating your children if you're learning alongside them? That's most kids, most humans learn by doing, not by being instructed or taught, like, taught in this really sterile, removed way. And so we do it together. And yes, let's be real. A lot of what they're learning right now, I already know, but there is nothing more fun to me than when one of them is like, asks a off the wall question about whales. I'm like, let me Google it. Let's find out. And then we learn things together. Last big one on the learning is, if this is for the parents, what do I want my kids to learn from watching me? Because this will inform your actions so deeply. If I want my children to learn how to respond instead of react, then I got to respond instead of react. If I want my children to learn how to handle conflict, I have to model healthy conflict. If I want my kids to voraciously read the Bible or read in general, they need to see me reading. And I know that we all hear, your actions teach your children far more than your words. It's just so true. So, what do I want my kids to learn from watching me? Is a great indicator of areas of growth that are possible in your life. So then we're going to get into my favorite one, which is planning. I love a plan, but I even more love, or have come to love, a loosely held concept of a plan that allows God to do whatever he wants to do, or whatever he's going to do anyway. I have done a lot of the rigid New Year's plans, and it's not even so much that I give up on them gave up on them in a short amount of time. It was that they blew up because my life went a completely different direction than what I had put to pen and paper. And so a lot of my plans have fallen apart, which is why I've really pivoted how I set up a quote unquote plan for the year. Again, we're going to do that at the end of the episode. But farmers would still use this time to plan what fields were going to rest, which ones were going to be filled with what animals would be bred. So much planning went into what happened in the spring. And so while I'm in agreement that this is not the time to start something new, I do think it is meant to be a time of deep intention and discerning and planning, which the three things we just talked about doing before this is what allows you to make the plan. Okay. So this is setting intentions for the year ahead of you, which is so much better than these tangible numerical goals that hustle culture tells us we need to set. I'm going to make this much money a year. I'm going to grow this many followers a year. I'm going to lose this many pounds this year. Or even like I'm going to walk this many steps. I'm going to read this many books. I mean, some of that, I guess, if that is like your jam, go for it. I'm not totally not shading that. It just doesn't feel right for me anymore. And so for me now, it more looks like questions like, where am I generally headed? Where, what kind of year do I want this to be? What kind of posture do I want to hold? What area of my life needs less pressure? Which area needs more attention? What needs to rest? What needs to be planted? Deciding what areas of your life get intention, but holding it with really open hands is why I've had to move away from making really hard and fast plans for my life because I want to be able to join with God with whatever he's going to do. And so what I more try to do now is decide the posture I'm going to join in it with him in. I just I feel like January gets a bad rap, but that's because our time has been hijacked by modernity, and we need to bring it back to what it's meant to be. Our ancestors did not use January to prove anything. And I really invite you to let go of setting hard and fast bumpers for yourself that you're probably going to spend the year hitting up against. And so instead of goals, this is what I like to do. I choose a word or a couple of words, a Bible verse, and then honestly, intentions. And then I will set a couple of personal goals that are very fluid. That there's an end, like you can see that this goal came to be, but it's not something that I feel like is going to hang over my head or that I feel like I can divert from and mess up. So, I'm not starting anything new or big this time of year or maybe even this year. I think there's a lot of just slow plodding ahead for me. I am going slow and I am wintering, but the wheels are turning. And I am finding myself excited about some things that I had put down for such a long time. And I feel like I have eyes to see the areas that I've gotten burnt out that actually are so life-giving. And so if you're interested, I'm going to run you through what my things for 2026 are. My words for 2026 are rooted hope. I want to have deep roots and lots of hope. I think after the year that I had in 2025, it would feel a lot easier to choose something other than hope because honestly, a lot of it felt kind of hopeless and desolate. And there was a lot of why, God? What's the point of all of this? But because he is a good father that gives us so much more than we could ask or dream of, he's given me eyes to see what he was doing with a lot of it. And that all that has done is stirred up hope in me that if he can use one of the hardest years of my life to produce fruit and to give me wisdom, then that's something that he can continue to do. It's like if he's already done it, he'll keep doing it. And so I have hope for 2026 that it's going to be a better year, but if it's not, I have a lot of hope that he'll use every single bit of it to grow me and to make me look more like him. And then I can't remember what ending well episode it was that I talked about the vision. Oh, it was the last episode. I think it was Becoming Her, where I talked about having the vision of standing in the grass and roots growing out of my feet and them just expanding really far and wide. And I talked about how I've spent so much of my life being tossed to and fro by doctrine, by people, by circumstances, by my own thoughts and feelings and struggles. And I've never really felt sturdy or steady. And I've always really leaned on my husband for his steadiness, which I plan to continue to do. But I want to have my own steadiness to offer people. And so rooted hope that is rooted in who God is, who he's always been to me, and the way that he's walked me through the last year. Like this just kind of felt like the only option to move forward. And then the verses that I chose to go with that I'm in the process of memorizing, but I'm not there yet, so I'm going to read it, is Psalm 1:1-4. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither, whether whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. And it's funny because I've read this verse so many times, because I cannot tell you how many times I've started at Psalms 1 and read through it. And it's always felt so unattainable to me. I'm just going to be honest. Being someone who delighted in the law of the Lord, which is just the instruction of the Lord, and being like a sturdy tree planted by a stream and producing fruit in season. I love that it includes that. It doesn't say that this tree produces fruit year round, because that's not how it works, but that in its season there is great fruit to be seen. That's always felt so far out of reach, but been something that I really wanted. And it feels wild to claim those verses and kind of speak them over the year and not do so in a, well, I don't know, we'll see way. But I'm like, yeah, God's going to do it. I already feel more like that person than I ever have. And so if I'm feeling that way, then he can continue to work with that, you know? And so those are that's like really the hinge point for me, is having those words in that verse. And I get a lot of questions when I've talked about it in the past on how you do that. I would listen to the Hearing from God episode of Ending Well if you haven't, because that will give you some real clarity on how to hear God and follow his direction. And like with a lot of what we've talked about in this episode, this is going to require some stillness and some quiet and some margin. I usually try to set aside some time, at the end of December, beginning of January, to really like lean in with God and read a lot of scripture and ask him to reveal this to me. And he does. And it's usually something that just kind of drops in my spirit. And then you check it against scripture and make sure it confirms it and move forward with that. And the great thing about this is it's not a New Year's resolution. So if you get to April and you go, oh, this doesn't really speak to me anymore, you can pivot. You can change it. But for me, 2026 is about my Bible, my marriage, my girls, my church, my healing, and the communities, both in real life and online, that God has given me to steward. And in that order, moving forward with deep roots and lots of hope and lots of love. Those are the things that I really want to focus on this year. My personal goals are pretty minimal, and they all kind of gravitate around the same thing. I want to try to be able to wear my natural nails. And all these are going to sound silly and small, but we're girls and we're going to allow ourselves that. I have had a skin picking neurotic habit since I was a kid. And the only way I've ever been able to not do it is to have something on my nails. And so as a result, my nails are really weak. And so I have gel on right now because I've made myself a little rehab plan. And for the first couple of months, I'm going to go with consistent gel on my nails so that I don't pick, because you don't need all the information, but I did try to just jump right into wearing my natural nails, and then I just shredded my cuticles to death. And so it's like, okay, let's maybe not cold turkey this like you've done everything else and try to step into it. And so I'm hoping by the end of the year to be able to wear my natural nails and not pick them to death. We shall see. I really want to embrace my natural waves. They're looking a little sad today, I'm not gonna lie, but it is also day 4. This is day 4 natural hair. And so I want to try to really push through that. The more I talk to people in like the curly, wavy world, it's like, you got to stick with it. It's a roller coaster. It's a science experiment. You've really got to kind of keep trial and error. And really just lots of personal healing. That's really my journey right now. 2020 through 2025, as with many of us, really did a number on me and on my nervous system. And so that is a huge priority, which I know there are some of us that feels selfish for. And I think I put off doing this for such a long time because it felt selfish. But when I reframed it to that I am doing this for my children and my children's children and my children's children's children, that if I can make small changes in my responses and in my nervous system and how I navigate the world, that could have really eternal effects. And I don't think that there is a cap on when that stops being impactful for our children, but I'm thankful to be able to do it when they're 8 and 11 and hopefully make some progress with that. So, another thing that I would also recommend is picking some spiritual disciplines for your year to commit to. Maybe pick some that feel comforting and some that feel challenging, some that fill your cup and some that stretch you, right? And just go with God. And if you need the refresher, like maybe we need to change our idea of spiritual disciplines a little bit because yes, read your Bible. Yes, go to church. Absolutely. But also feel the sun on your face and touch grass. And be consistent in checking in on your people and letting people check in on you and ask how you can pray for them and Sabbath and have one-on-one intentional time with your children for short periods of time or long periods of time. Saturate your life in worship. I think we can get kind of tunnel vision on spiritual disciplines. Spiritual disciplines are practices or habits that help deepen your faith and build your spiritual strength. And yeah, reading my Bible is the primary one for that and going to church. But also, like I said, being in nature is a spiritual discipline for me. Moving my body is a spiritual discipline for me. All of those things are like supports to my faith and my strength. And when I expanded what spiritual disciplines are for myself, I found they no longer felt like habits or boxes to check. They just became integrated in my life, if that makes sense. So I don't have anything flashy to leave you with. There are no numbers here except for Bible verses. I'm hoping for contentment. I'm really excited to see what God does with like content creation, podcasting, perhaps some longer form written content. I'm just really open-handed and letting God lead with it. It's been such a wild, radical pivot as far as, my work and content goes. And I feel like I'm close to 6-ish months into the change that God asked me to make, and it still feels super foreign. I still feel like a baby deer, like kind of walking around and not knowing what they're doing. But I'm just really trying to be obedient. And I am so excited to see what this year brings us as a community. I think a lot of us are feeling tired and drawn towards a slower life and a more simple pace. And I think there are things available to a lot of us that we never thought would be available to us or even within reach. And so it's like 2025 was good, hard. I would love to not repeat it. But if this year coming up is hard again, I'm facing it as a completely different person than I did last year. And that brings me hope. That if God and I survived last year, if this year is as bad as it was or worse, like he's still good and he's still in it. And so hopefully this was helpful. I know this was, close to an hour, but I wanted to cover a lot of ground. That's the joy of long form content. And reminder that you can get the PDF in the show notes, show description part of this episode wherever you listened or watched. And I hope that it's helpful. I hope it sets the stage for a really great year come the real new year in March. So I love you guys.